Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
So today we're tackling something that I know can be a bit of a headache for those of you prepping for the PMP exam,
Oh, yeah, definitely a big one.
Earned Value Management, or EVM for short. It's one of those concepts that just has so many formulas it can feel overwhelming.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way.
No, not at all.
And that's exactly why we're here today. To break down EVM using a first principles approach so you can really understand it inside and out.
I like that first principles. It's like getting back to the basics.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of just memorizing a bunch of equations, we're going to build up your understanding from the ground up, just like laying a strong foundation for a house.
Makes sense. You can't build a house on shaky ground.
Exactly. And to help us with this, our source material uses this really practical example of a 10-day project installing 100 meters of pipe with a budget of $10,000.
Okay, I can picture that.
Yeah, that's a
No.
great way to visualize what we're talking about. So let's dive into that first principle.
All right, let's do it.
First principle number one is the value of planning. This is where plan value, or PV, comes in.
PV is basically your budget roadmap. It tells you how much you should have spent by a certain point in the project.
So it's like a benchmark.
Right. So in our pipe example, let's say we're on day 5, and the plan was to have installed 50 meters of pipe by then. The PV would be $5,000.
Half the project duration, half the budget spent.
Exactly. At least that's the ideal scenario.
Right, because of course in the real world, things don't always go according to plan.
Never do.
So how does EVM help us track that?
That brings us to first principle number 2, measuring real progress with earned value, or EV.
EV. This is where we see what's really happening.
Right. EV is like your project scorecard. It tells you how much of the budget you've actually earned by completing work.
Okay, so it's not about time. It's about the value of the work that's actually been done.
Precisely.
So let's go back to those pipes. Let's say on day 5, they've only managed to put in 40 meters.
A bit behind schedule.
Yeah, they are.
Oh.
What would the EV be in this case?
So they've completed 40% of the work, right?
Right.
And 40% of the $10,000 budget is $4,000.
So the EV would be $4,000.
Exactly. And remember, we always measure EV in terms of the planned budget, not the actual cost.
Okay, that's important to remember. So we've got our planned value, our earned value, but what about the actual money spent?
Yes, the reality check.
Because I have a feeling that those two things don't always quite line up.
Oh, they rarely do. Which is why we need first principle number 3, facing the reality of costs with actual cost, or AC.
Okay, so AC is the bottom line.
It's the total cost incurred for the work performed up to that point in time.
So for our pipe project, let's say they've actually spent $4,500 to get those 40 meters installed.
Okay.
So not only are they behind schedule, but it sounds like they're also over budget.
Sounds like it. This is where EVM really starts to show its value. By comparing PV, EV, and AC, we can see the variances.
The variances.
Yeah.
So that's how we figure out if things are going well or not.
Exactly. They tell us how the project is performing against the plan.
Okay, I'm ready to talk variances. Let's start with schedule variance, or SV. How does that work?
First principle number 4, spotting schedule slippage with SV. It's simply the difference between earned value and planned value. So SV equals EV minus PV.
EV minus PV. Got it.
And this tells you whether you're ahead, behind, or right on schedule.
So in our example where we're behind schedule, what would the SV be?
Well, our EV is $4,000 and our PV is $5,000. So the SV would be negative $1,000.
Negative $1,000.
Exactly. A negative SV means you're behind schedule, and a positive SV means you're ahead. This is a key concept for the PMP exam.
Got it. Schedule variance checked off the list. What about the budget? How do we measure if we're sticking to the financial plan?
That's where cost variance, or CV, comes in. Our 5th principle, keeping costs in check.
CV. Okay.
CV is calculated as EV minus AC.
So EV minus AC, what would that look like for our pipe installation?
Well, our EV is $4,000 and our AC is $4,500.
So
The CV would be negative $500.
negative $500, not looking.
Not great. Means we're over budget. And again, this is something you need to know for the PMP exam. Negative is bad news, positive is good news.
Okay, so we've got a project that's behind schedule and over budget. But EVM isn't just about pointing fingers. It's about understanding why these things are happening so we can fix them.
Right, absolutely. Those variances are like smoke detectors. They
Yeah.
alert us to a problem so we can investigate and take action.
I like that analogy. So we've covered plan value, earned value, actual cost, schedule variance, and cost variance. A lot of ground covered already.
It's a lot to take in.
But this is really just the beginning. There's so much more to EVM and how it can help you succeed on the PMP exam and as a project manager.
Definitely. We've only just scratched the surface. Welcome back to our deep dive on EVM.
I feel like we just got started,
Right, there's so much to cover.
but I think we've got a good handle on the basics now.
I think so too. So let's move on to how we can actually use these concepts on your PMP exam and in real-world projects.
Because just knowing the formulas isn't enough. You've
Yeah.
got to know how to apply them.
Absolutely. So let's imagine you're looking at a project and you see the Schedule Performance Index, or SPI, is less than 1. What would you think?
Okay, so SPI is EV divided by PV.
That's right.
If it's less than 1, that means the earned value is less than the planned value. So the project is behind schedule.
Exactly. A low SPI is a warning sign. It's like your GPS telling you you're going to be late.
I hate when that happens.
Don't we all? But what would you do about it? Would you just keep driving the same way?
No way I try to find a faster route or at least let the person I'm meeting know I'm running behind.
Exactly. And that's what we do in project management, too. We need to take action to get the project back on track.
Okay, but how do we do that?
Well, first you have to figure out why the project is behind schedule. Is it scope creep, not enough resources, bad time estimates?
So it's like detective work, using EVM as our clues.
I like that. Well, once you know the root cause, you can start looking for solutions.
So what are some things we could do to fix a schedule slippage?
There are a few classic strategies. You could try crashing the schedule by adding more resources.
So just throw more people at the problem.
Sometimes that works. But you could also try fast-tracking certain tasks by doing them in parallel instead of one after another.
Makes sense. And sometimes you might even have to adjust the scope of the project.
Right. If you can reduce the workload, that can help get things back on schedule.
And of course, communication is key throughout all of this.
Absolutely. Keep your stakeholders informed about what's happening and what you're doing to fix it.
Transparency is so important.
You don't want to be that project manager who hides bad news until it's too late.
Definitely not. Okay, so we've talked about schedule variance and SPI.
Yeah.
What about cost performance? Let's say the CPI is less than 1.
All right, CPI is less than 1. What does that mean?
Okay, so CPI is EV divided by AC.
Right.
So if CPI is less than 1, it means we're getting less value for our money than we planned.
That's it. It means the project is facing cost inefficiencies.
So if SPI is like being late for a meeting, CPI is like realizing you paid way too much for that coffee.
I think I get what you mean.
It's not a total disaster, but it's definitely something you want to fix.
Exactly. And just like with schedule issues, the first step is figuring out what's causing the problem. Where is the overspending happening?
Is it materials? Labor? Something else?
Right. You need to know what's driving those cost overruns before you can start looking for solutions.
What are some things we can do to address cost overruns?
Well, it depends on the situation, of course. But some common approaches include negotiating better prices with suppliers.
To try to get a better deal.
Exactly. You could also explore alternative materials or construction methods, or try to streamline processes to improve efficiency.
Make things run more smoothly.
And sometimes you might even have to go back to the stakeholders and ask for more budget.
I was hoping we wouldn't have to do that.
I know, but sometimes it's necessary. And EVM gives you the data to back up your request. You can show them exactly where the project stands financially.
So it's not just about saying we need more money. It's about having the data to support that request.
Right. It takes the guesswork out of project management and helps you make informed decisions.
Okay, so far we've been talking about what to do when things are going wrong. But what about when everything is going right? Can EVM still be useful then?
Absolutely. It's not just about identifying problems. It's also about tracking progress, celebrating successes, and using data to continuously improve.
So even when things are going well, EVM can help us do even better.
Exactly. If you're consistently seeing high SPIs and CPIs, that's a sign that you're doing something right.
It's like a pat on the back from the data.
And it can also give you more leverage when requesting additional resources or taking on new challenges. After all, if you have a proven track record of delivering projects on time and under budget, people are going to be more likely to trust you with bigger and better things.
That makes sense. So EVM isn't just about putting out fires, it's about setting yourself up for success from the start.
Exactly. And the best part is these principles can be applied to any project, no matter what industry or size.
So whether you're building a skyscraper or planning a party, EVM can help.
That's right. The core concepts are the same.
I'm feeling a lot more confident about EVM now. I think we should do a little quiz to make sure our listeners are following along.
I love quizzes. Let's do it.
Okay, first question. You're managing a project with a BAC of $100,000. The current earned value is $60,000 and the actual cost is $70,000. What's the cost variance for this project?
All right, let me think. CV is EV minus AC. So $60,000 minus $70,000, that's negative $10,000.
That's right. The project is currently over budget. Next question. The SPI for a project is 0.8. What does this tell us about the project's schedule performance?
An SPI of zero point 0.8 means the project is behind schedule. We're only completing work at 80% of the planned rate.
Correct. Last question. The EAC for a project is $120,000, and the BAC was $100,000. What's the variance at completion for this project?
Okay, VAC is BAC minus EAC. So $100,000 minus $120,000, that's -$20,000, meaning the project is projected to finish $20,000 over budget. Yikes.
You got it. You're an EVM master.
Ah, I wouldn't say that.
But seriously, even if you don't get every quiz question right, the key is to understand the concepts. That's what will really help you on the PMP exam and in your career as a project manager.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about building that solid foundation of understanding.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from basic formulas to real-world scenarios and even a quiz.
I'm exhausted.
Me too. But we're not quite finished yet. There's still more to explore.
More.
Yes. In our final segment, we're going to delve into some advanced EVM techniques and insider tips for those tough EVM questions on the PMP exam.
Sounds intense.
Welcome back to our EVM deep dive. We're in the final stretch now.
The home stretch.
Exactly. We've covered the first principles, tackled real-world scenarios, and even aced that pop quiz.
Yeah.
But there's still more to uncover.
Always more to learn.
That's right. In this last part, we're going beyond the basics to explore some advanced EVM techniques that can give you an edge on the PMP exam.
And these aren't just exam tricks. They're tools that real project managers use every day to make better decisions.
So we're talking pro-level EVM moves.
Exactly. Let's talk about forecasting. Remember? Estimate at completion, or EAC.
Yeah, that's where we use the CPI to predict the final project cost.
Right. It's like looking into the future of the project. But that basic EAC formula assumes that the current cost performance will just stay the same.
So what if we know things are going to change?
That's where these more advanced EAC formulas come in handy.
Okay, so we're not just blindly following the initial CPI?
Nope. We're using our judgment and any new information we have to make a more accurate prediction.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's like if your GPS tells you you're going to be late, but, there's less traffic up ahead.
Exactly. You adjust your expectations based on what you know.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What are some examples of those advanced EAC formulas?
Well, one example is EAC equals AC plus BAC minus EV.
Okay, that looks a little more complicated.
It's not too bad. It's basically saying, let's acknowledge where we are cost-wise right now, but assume future work will be completed at the planned budget.
So we're kind of giving the project the benefit of the doubt.
In a way, yes. Another scenario is when the original budget was just way too low.
That happens.
More often than you'd think. In that case, you need a fresh start.
Like hitting the reset button.
Right. You'd use what's called a bottom-up approach, where you re-estimate the cost of each remaining task from scratch.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It can be, but it gives you the most accurate EAC possible.
So it's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And knowing about these different EAC formulas shows that you really understand EVM.
Okay, so we've got these different EAC formulas. What other tips do you have for tackling those EVM questions on the exam?
The biggest thing is to not get lost in the formulas. Focus on what each formula means and what it tells you about the project.
So don't just memorize them, understand them.
Exactly. If you can visualize the relationships between planned value, earned value, and actual cost, the formulas will make a lot more sense.
It's like understanding how the ingredients work together to make a cake.
I like that analogy. Another tip is to pay close attention to the wording of the questions. The PMP exam is known for its tricky wording.
So it's not enough to just know the formulas you have to be a word detective too.
Right. Practice reading those questions carefully, underlining key words, and making sure you really understand what's being asked.
Great advice. And of course, practice tests are essential for preparing for the PMP exam.
Absolutely. The more you practice, the more confident you'll feel on exam day.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about EVM. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they prepare for the PMP exam?
EVM is a powerful tool not just for passing an exam, but for becoming a better project manager. Don't be afraid to embrace those. First principles, practice those formulas, and ask questions if you need help.
And even if those EVM calculations start to feel overwhelming, remember to take a deep breath, break them down into smaller steps, and maybe picture those pipes.
We believe in you, future PMPs.
Before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with a challenge. Think about how you could apply the principles of EVM to your own projects.
It could be anything: planning a wedding, renovating your home, launching a business.
It's a great way to put what you've learned into practice.
We'd love to hear how you're using EVM in your own projects. Share your stories with us on social media using the hashtag DeepDiveEVM.
Thanks for joining us on this EVM journey. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.